consider the challenges we're all facing today with COVID-19, and how we can effectively, as technology leaders, enable an environment to continue productivity, to continue providing services to Canadians. And in this conversation, really looking at, what does this really mean for the workforce around training and learning, and continuing to develop the skills needed for the digital economy. And as well, when you look at a remote workforce, well, how does that really translate now in terms of the tools needed for folks to be enabled to do their jobs, and how do you effectively train more in a virtual fashion? So we're great. It's a pleasure to be with you here today, John, and have a conversation around the digital workforce, and what learning, sort of reinventing learning. What does that really look like in a virtual type world? So maybe if I could first just give you a few minutes to talk about who you are, and what right now at D2L, what seems to be front and center with respect to enabling the types of technologies you're working on, and the solutions for a digital workforce, and the learning associated in this time.
Great to join you, Keith. And my name is John Baker, for folks that I've not met, and it's great to join the CIO Strategy Council to have this conversation. I don't think there's been a more important time for the work that we've been doing together to really strengthen the skills and provide the future skills that our employees are going to need across the whole country than there is today. In our case, I started up D2L, which is a company that provides a learning platform and services to our clients. But 20 years ago, with a singular mission of helping to transform from traditional classrooms, if you can imagine, to a fully online experience. And as you pointed out, Keith, we're living in a bit of an unprecedented time. This is my 6th week working from home, and I still have yet to find myself a desk, which we're still working on. But in our case, we've been helping millions and millions of people all around the world make that transition from what they were doing, face-to-face to a fully online virtual learning experience, and going through all the different phases that people go through as they make that rapid transition in an emergency response mode. Through to what can we do to create a higher quality learning experience long term. And in our case, we work in schools, in universities, and in companies all over the world. So we're getting to see a broad spectrum of how people are using this type of technology to have an impact on people's lives. So look forward to the conversation.
No, that's great. And I guess do you, considering the audience being CIOs around this discussion, and hearing from you, what do you see as kind of the immediate actions CIOs should be taking in terms of implementing virtual learning within their organizations?
Yeah, well, in our case, like probably all of you've made that transition to work from home. So virtual learning is becoming a critical priority for most. And those that are in our space that have not made that transition are really struggling today to onboard new people, or to make sure the people that they have get the skills they need to pivot into the new responsibilities they're going to need to support as we see all the change around us. And so what's critical for the CIOs is to really leverage this as an enablement opportunity. In our case, we anchored our response to COVID-19 off of a 4-pillar response strategy. Our first response was making sure that our employees were safe. Then it was, like probably many of you, pivoting quickly to the supply chain to make sure the technologies and the things that we use to support our clients were all going to be there. And then quickly moving into, how can we help? How can we support others make this transition? And then our 4th pillar was around a financial pillar to just make sure that we make it through these types of times with strength, and we look for the opportunities as well too. And with that, in terms of online learning, many folks have pivoted to technologies like what we're using right now, which is designed for meetings to very quickly try to spin up, synchronous sessions, live sessions to do training for various different topics. but are quickly learning that that's not a great way to continue to drive engagement and to support all the different learning modalities, if you will, within their organization. So moving quickly to help build out online programming to support the different types of learning that's going to be required, and then also to broker different partnerships with academic institutions on specific long-term skills changes that are needed for the economy. Those are a few key areas that we're focused on right now.
So you've kind of mentioned, this current environment that we're in. It's acting as a bit of a catalyst to really, rethink, reimagine the way that organizations are transforming their businesses, the way that they're delivering services to their clients and customers, and for government folks to citizens at large. I guess part of a question I would have for you is, regarding the virtual learning piece here, how can virtual learning make a substantial difference for a business? If we consider, I've been in conversations around, defining this new normal. Is this something that you see within, your organization in terms of the services you're providing, that, this could act as a bit of a catalyst to transform the way in which folks learn?
Yeah, Keith, I think you're using the right language there. This is definitely a new normal that we're approaching. We're not in that normal phase right now. I think what we're seeing is this acting as a quick catalyst to pivot what used to be 80+% of learning doing it in a face-to-face model to now 100% virtual. And so that's a very quick transition. And there's a lot of work that has to go into making that a quality experience now versus what it was in the past. So I also think your new normal comments is a good one, because as we go through this experience and we start to learn tools like whether it's D2L or other tools that support this learning experience, how much more productive we might be with that type of technology, the impact that it has on our employees, the ability to do things more efficiently. I don't think there's any going back. We're probably still going to go race back to the workplace to work together, but no one's going to want to, do things manually like they used to do in the past. There's going to be a new level of automation, a new level of technology that really has gotten accelerated during this pandemic. There's no question about that.
So when you consider would you be able to give a flavor of the kinds of tools and tactics CIOs can use in a virtual environment? How do you create an engaging environment? Interestingly enough, we're having this conversation and, we're all working remotely. My daughter's upstairs on a Google Meet with her classroom right now, in elementary school. So I'm curious to hear from you as, CIOs look to, enabling technologies to ensure that, there's an environment to learn, to generate the skills and ensure that folks have the resources that they need to do their job. What are some of those what's the tooling look like? What are the tactics to keep an engaging environment versus what you commonly see in person? How do you do that digitally?
Yeah, so there's a number of different strategies you can use to drive engagement, and that's a key measure for us. We measure, CIOs like to measure things. I like to measure things as well too. In our case, we tend to measure things like learning outcomes. So are people getting smarter? We're achieving better business outcomes. There could be an engagement score. Are my employees more engaged or less engaged than they were before? It could be a productivity score. So am I saving the company money? Those are quick measures that CIOs can put in place to understand if they're vectoring in on the right solution that drives the right outcomes for the employees across the organization. I know my CIO, if you will, at D2L, the first thing that we did when we were working from home was doing quick engagement survey of the employees to make sure we're still productive, make sure that if there's anything we need, we're getting those needs addressed. And then quickly we pivoted into how do we take the employees that jobs no longer really exist because we're now virtual, and reskill them into other areas of the company, and then how do we apply that same skill set out to our client base? And so how do you engage people online? So some of it's using video, but it's kind of counterintuitive. The research that we show using like this type of technology is that there's a quick drop off in terms of engagement. It's okay to use video, once a week or once every couple of weeks in terms of a session, but we find engagement actually drops very quickly if you use it too often. Most people want to be able to go through learning in a self-paced manner. So they can go through, interactives, so things like drag and drop exercises or simulations, or you can apply gaming engine techniques, leaderboards, give badges. There's all kinds of different tools you can use to drive engagement within the actual content. But synchronous tends to be one that people quickly pivot out of. Like your example of your daughter using Google Meet, I'd be curious on if she'll still be using Google Meet in about a week or two, because most classes that I know have already dropped off of using that type of technology because the students don't show up after about a week or two. And so if we want to pivot to really high quality online learning experiences for employees, or in that case schools, if you're a CIO of a school, or even a university, then we need to think about not just a short-term emergency response. Like I'm in a panic, I need my teachers to still be able to teach just like they were doing before, and now I need to pivot to a better quality experience. So in our case, we have technology that enables you to stream video, set up virtual classrooms, to do a lot of the synchronous activity. And those things have all spiked very quickly. Like if you can imagine like a 20x increase in the utilization. But what we're seeing now is the more traditional ways that people have been doing online learning for the last 10 plus years are now taking root. And we're seeing the increase of that wave of adoption next, as a sort of next phase, if you will, of transitioning to fully virtual learning.
Yeah, it's interesting because even if we, consider my daughter learning upstairs right now, it's that shift to get to actually having a synchronous conversation with the class, that just happened. Like it took the we talk about how we've been at home for 5-6 weeks now. It's taken, unfortunately, for some sectors of the economy to make that shift. It's actually taken some time, just by virtue of where their technology needs were, or how they were addressing it, for sure.
Yeah. So some of our clients were ready to do it in a heartbeat. So we had been running like inclement weather tests with some of our clients for snow days, and those clients that have been practiced at this were able to pivot to fully online and keep the engagement level still running at 95% of their students still logging in, still engaging. It's pretty impressive when you think about it, especially in your, in that case, they're scaling to like 1 million folks logging in a day, which is not a small number. And in other cases where they try to do this overnight, it's been a bit more of a challenge. I think those that have been doing fully online for a long time, really this is a normal day for them, whereas everybody else is still scrambling to get caught up to that new normal, if you will.
Right. So with much of the workforce, if not all of the workforce, quite remote now, and what do you consider as those critical success factors that need to be addressed in self-learning through being remote? Like what are those critical success factors that you can sort of say, yes, this is having yes, this will ensure that we get the outcomes we're looking for, and the fact that you don't have that ability in terms of physical presence to know necessarily where a person is and what they need and all of those kinds of things. So in terms of the remote environment and sort of self-learning, what do you see as critical success factors here?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is you define what success looks like. And in learning, you tend to define what are the competencies or skills that I want my people to develop. And then you link that. In our case, it's just a checkbox. You just go, this is the learning activity attached to this particular skill, or this is the assessment attached to that skill. And then you can track it. And then you can, it's not that part's a base foundational piece, which is you have to have a great program built to support the learning that you want to deliver. You have to have it mapped to the competencies so that you can personalize the learning. And really importantly, I think the factor that has had the biggest impact for a lot of our clients is using that as a way to drive feedback, or helping an employee go from where they are today to where they want to be in the future as part of their career development. We as leaders become almost coaches to supply them the right feedback at the right moment to get over those hurdles that they're having in making that pivot. And there's good tools that we've built over the years, and these are quite common in the learning space around things like rubrics or competency engines, or the ability for us to do all those mappings so that you can do that at scale. So if you're trying to do this for 1 million people, or even just a few thousand people, you can do it with a greater ease, if you will. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I guess the question in terms of a follow-up to that is, what types of questions are you being asked the most, or are you finding that folks, in terms of trying to create that environment, that a learning environment for their workforce, what are you hearing as sort of the common challenges, or what questions are you being asked to help solve for?
Well, I think for about a month, we weren't quite sure what was going on, because a lot of our corporate clients had actually put pause on many different projects, and that's the natural response in an emergency. They, just trying to deal with the emergencies that are going on. We're now seeing a big pivot in terms of the responses that we're getting are how quickly can we put our entire onboarding program online, because we need to continue to hire people. And I've got a couple key skills that I need to develop in my people, because I'm rolling out a new policy, or rolling out a new strategy, or rolling out pivoting as a business, and so we need to get everyone rallied around that. And so it's very tactical course development right now, and then longer term, I think it's going to be something different again. But I think we've seen quick pivot from not really doing much to support learning, to now very quickly going, I need to really focus on the onboarding and critical skill development. And then I think longer term, it's going to be, how do I get 1 million people back to work across the country? It's going to be the really critical question that we all have to ask ourselves and pull around. So it's the right strategy.
No doubt. And I'll certainly, for folks that are joining us today, again, by all means, if you have any questions, we're happy to take them and integrate them into the conversation here. I guess when we talk about reinventing workplace learning, what insights could you share in making this, not only it can be very efficient, but effective? What do you see? What do you see as the high-level insights here on reinventing, creating that new normal?
Yeah, I think the questions we used to ask before COVID-19 were, do you like your learning platform? And the typical answer was no. And so the reinvention was, how do we build a great learning experience that inspires people? And I think the reinvention has really been a human-centered design. So how do I help people get the right feedback? How do we help them set the right goals? How do we personalize the learning experience to them? How do we give them a badge or recognition for their achievements? These are all big shifts from, traditional corporate learning has been, page turner, watch this video for 3 hours and sort of check the box. And the reinvention is linking learning strategically into the mandate of the organization to really have a positive impact on the business, improving engagement, improving business outcomes, reducing costs, happier clients. That's the impact that we do this right.
So we do have a question from the audience, and it'd be great to hear your take on this. As we sort of look at the unprecedented measures put in place, and the length of time where when are we going to get back to being back in the office and those and the like. And I guess as well for just the education system, we go from September to June, or September to April. What should we? The question is what should we do to prepare for September? What does that look like?
Yeah, everyone's waiting for the fog to lift, if you will, in terms of giving us a picture of what's coming up in the future. You know, we did a course at the very beginning of this pandemic on COVID-19, and for us, it gave us a clear picture that there's going to be a lot of uncertainty probably for the next 12 to 18 months, and so the prudent thing to do in terms of the next few months is to prepare for what does it look like in September if we're still working from home, still learning from home, and how do we prepare now to make sure that that experience is as a good experience as it possibly can be, and then how do we as a country pull together around the critical pillars that we need to solve to be able to slowly open up the economy back up again, so that we can start going back to work in one form or another, even if it's in shifts or certain groups of people or certain categories of work. We've got to start thinking about how do we actually get things back to a little bit more of a normalcy. And learning is a critical component of that, because the way that we were doing it before needs to be changed. Yeah.
All right, and I guess
then the foreign students is a good question that just popped up.
Yeah.
Right. That's going to be a huge issue, right? So the Canadian economy, in particular, I think it's tens of billions of dollars flow into the economy from international students. We just saw, I think, President Trump shut the border to all immigration, or is about to shut the border to all immigration starting shortly. I don't see a scenario where foreign students come back this fall. Personally, I think they may come back online, but I don't see a scenario where we're going to be ready to make a call today, at least, unless something really dramatically changes, where we're seeing students coming back into the country from international locations. Otherwise, we risk sort of a second wave, if you will, of this pandemic. And so, we need to change a whole bunch of policies. We need to enable that. We need to make sure we can retain the students that are in the system. And education is lacking globally. There's a shortage of 69 million educators globally. If you can believe that number, it's a pretty high number. And so Canada has a huge role to provide in terms of educating not just folks here, but globally. So, but that's a big change with how we've been thinking about education in the past.
That's no, very, 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 very. It's a big number. It's quite shocking. So, I guess if we had to sort of sum things up here, what would be your key takeaway for CIOs, tech leaders, as they look to create an enabling environment for workplace learning, and even extend that beyond education systems as they are grappling with their students and how to effectively ensure they get the learning outcomes that they've signed up for. So, what would be your key takeaways?
Yeah, one of the people I met on the Business Council in Canada was Blake, who runs OMERS, and he told me a story of his dad during the last big recession. It was a while ago, keeping his sawmill open, producing hardwood floor, even though no one was buying it, just to keep his employees engaged and doing something productive. And well, when the economy came back, he was the only one that had supply and fed the demand, so it was a huge impact. I think we, as a country, need to make sure that we keep our people productive. And so that's going to demand them learning new skills, because clearly they're not in jobs right now that are in demand, otherwise they would still be working. And so we need to reskill as quickly as possible into the areas that there are demand. I know in our case, we're hiring a lot of people to keep up with the demands in our space. We're not the only ones. There's a lot of folks that are looking at this as an opportunity to accelerate a lot of work, build a lot of digital infrastructure or other types of infrastructure. And we need to come together to solve that challenge. And we've got to work together, not just individual companies, but how do we build consortiums of working with universities and colleges to support the upskilling and reskilling that we're going to need. All of these things are challenges we're going to rally around together. I don't think any of us alone can solve the challenges of getting 1 million plus Canadians back to work. But it's going to be a critical role that you play here, Keith, in terms of rallying the CIOs around the country to this cause. And I couldn't be prouder of the work that the D2Lers are putting in and our clients are doing to support an education or learning response in this crisis so that we can speed our recovery.
Well, I appreciate the time, John. It was great having a little fireside chat with you and really looking at what the reinvention of workplace learning, potentially looks like, and where, we, as you said, there's no one person or one organization that can really tackle this crisis. We're all in this together, and we need to ensure that we're reskilling and upskilling and doing it in a very effective and efficient manner. So I appreciate your insights, your thoughts, your takeaways, and hopefully for those that joined us today, it gives them some insights as they look to ensure that the right tools and resources are available to their staff and across their organization. And then similarly, that we all do band together to tackle many of these challenges that, if anything, have acted as a bit of a catalyst now with COVID-19 on the need for critical digital infrastructure to be able to do the many things we're doing.
Yeah, Keith, on that point, we wrote a white paper on the future of work 2 years ago, thinking it was a 10-year vision. And our team has sat down about a month ago and said, this 10-year vision just got compressed into this year. And so I agree with you. Your catalyst is the right word. And if we do this right, we can emerge from this stronger than we went into it.